I'm really excited that we have Lisa Maguire with us today. Um, by way of introduction, I'm actually going to read a quote from our last session's guest speaker, Amy Liu, and it goes like this. Lisa is a professional historian and amateur genealogist who documents family journeys through history. Her Substack traces her fascinating heritage through generational ancestor stories. Did I pronounce that correctly?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Of Irish relatives in French Canada. These literary gems remind me, in their period atmosphere, tone, and empathy, of Michael Onadaatje's portraits of Canada, especially his marvelous In the Skin of a Lion, which I, Amy, highly recommend. But Lisa, this is part of what I wanted you to hear today. But Lisa embellishes her tales with a wealth of photographic imagery, which gives them extra warmth, dimension, and emotional power. And when you read through more than one story, I'm sure that you'll feel this as well. And Amy closes by saying, I'm in awe of her achievement, and so was eager to find out how she approaches the obvious abundance of family legacy and lore in order to fashion her ancestor stories. So, welcome, Lisa. And I have a few questions before you jump into Cathedral Parkway, if that's okay with you.
Mhm.
Okay. Um, I wanted to know, because I haven't seen this anywhere, and maybe you have written about it, but what drew you to history as a profession?
Oh, that's very interesting. That's a very interesting question. I think that really ties back to my interest in my family. Um, my background is my family was of Irish ethnicity, but I grew up in Montreal, and so the French language was never a foreign language to me. I didn't necessarily speak it very well, but I certainly understood it completely. And then I was interested in French literature, and then from there I got interested in French Civ, French history, and so I was naturally drawn to studying history through language and culture. And then I think I doubled back and became more interested in my family history, and I started seeing it through the lens of what I would consider more traditional academic history. And so the particular kind of history that I really find fascinating and I've always found fascinating and what I've really delved to for to tell my family story is what's called microhistory. Microhistory was a genre of history writing. It's still very much alive today. It was sort of made a big splash in the 70s. There were a number of books that came out in the 70s. There was The Cheese and the Worms, which I highly recommend, which is the story of a 15th century miller in Italy who was put on trial for uh, um, uh, heresy. And the historian looks at the trial transcripts not to understand why he's put on trial for heresy, but to understand the world of this man's imagination and how he understood the world, how he lived in the world. And it was a completely original way of looking at history, looking at one unfamous person and understanding what that person's world was like. And so I think since then, microhistory has become a way for us to understand the experience of ordinary people through very small studies like community, biography, you know, the genealogy is a good place, but anything, it could be any small subject that can tell us a lot about the broader currents of history. So that's kind of my groove. That's what I'm interested most in when I write about my family, is writing about them through seeing them as historical actors and understanding them through the context of the history that they not only lived in, but they created. Because all of us are not just participants, we are actually active agents, right? We are all creating history as we move through the world. So this is something that I think people don't think about enough in unless they're an academic historian. Like they don't people don't the people think of kings and generals. They don't think of how ordinary people make history every day, right? So that's
Yes,
kind of how I got interested in telling the
yes,
family story through that lens.
yes. And something you said in that same interview with Amy um, touched me because Amy had said something like, I never thought my family was interesting enough to
Mm,
write about. And you kind of delved into that a little
mm,
more deeply by saying that it's these kinds of stories that you're actually telling that make people interesting, you know.
Yeah, yeah, everyone's interesting. Everyone has a story, right? And not only does everyone have a story and everyone interesting, but that everyone can potentially refract the larger world that they lived in. You know,
Yeah,
whether it's you're replicating a custom or a culture, whether you are protesting, something that is the power structure you live in, or it could be any number of things that where ordinary people are actually actively making history.
yeah. Okay. I have two other questions, but I think I'll just go down to one so that you could get on with your thing for today. Um, let me, okay, so I love what I understand to be the meaning behind the word ancestors,
Mhm.
which piggybacks a little bit on what you were speaking about, but I want to go in a different direction, which is you write so beautifully. And did you have any formal education in storytelling, in addition to your history with history? So
No, no,
storytelling.
I have. Well, I've always been interested in fiction writing. I've never written, like, never published anything in fiction writing, but I took like fiction writing workshops and such. But it's really been as an avid reader of fiction that I got interested in fiction writing techniques and wanted to write myself. So
Yeah,
yeah, absolutely. It's a big part of what I do is trying to bring the past to life by using techniques of fiction writing.
right.
Absolutely.
And in addition to the photographs and images and objects that you include in your
Hmm.
stories.
Hmm.
So with that, I'll kick it over to you. And I
Okay.
know you have something you want to share with us today, so thank you.
Yeah. So I don't know if anyone had a chance to read this text before the meeting, so I can just briefly introduce it. So most of my stories are about my own family. As I said, I'm Canadian. I'm from Montreal. My husband, however, I met my husband in New York. His family comes from a family of New Yorkers, and his family is Jewish, and he has a very colorful, interesting family. I don't write a lot about them because I certainly don't write about living people who are not my immediate family. I don't think that's very intrusive, right? But I did want to I wrote one piece about his family's shul in their hometown in Ukraine. And now I wrote a piece about his grandfather, and I got his permission to write about it because, he's gone and basically all of his children are now passed away. So I don't feel like, and none of the grandchildren would be offended by this. I think this is pretty much an assessment of him that everyone shares. So I didn't think I was, stepping on any toes or invading anyone's privacy. But he is a real character. I mean, I don't know if you haven't had a chance to read this. I think you'd be in for a real wild ride because he was a daydreamer, like real party animal, trigamist. I mean, just like real man of a thousand faces, really, and someone ultimately unknowable. And I think that was the starting point that my husband was like, I don't really know this guy. Like I know things about him. I've heard stories, like family stories about him, but I really don't know this person. So that was sort of the origin of this. And I wanted to get to telling his story because I thought it was really interesting. And the photographs and the other images I chose are really an integral part of it. So before we get into it, I just wanted to talk a little bit about like that process. So first caveat is I'm not like a person who has any background in like critical theory and semiotics. Like I don't know anything about Roland Barthes or Susan Sontag and created the creation of authenticity or the creating of evidence. I don't do that. So people will just bear with me that I'm coming in this rather naively. But I think walking through the process of how I'm selecting these pictures, I think could be interesting for people. And as I said, they're integral to the writing. One of the things I like about Substack is being able to include images in the text and make them really part of the narrative, build them into the narrative. And so that's why I think of them as integral to the story. And when they're embedded in a piece of creative nonfiction or memoir, they can have many different kinds of effects. They can propel the story forward. They can serve as a kind of punctuation. They can also comment on the text in a way that you would, in a way that's like a nonverbal, comment, that makes the reader think more deeply about what you're talking about, or consider or savor the mystery, or even comment and sort of provide like an alternate view or a deeper dimension. There's all kinds of ways that the image can serve, in that function. And also, of course, it can elicit moods and vibes and emotions that it becomes a shorthand, so you don't have to spend a lot of text doing that. You can just have the photograph that elicits the mood that you're looking for. And the thing that's super interesting about photographs in particular is that we as modern people are so sophisticated as consumers of images. Like we, compared to like our great grandparents, or like we can look at a picture and we just pull so much data and so much information out of that. We decode it in a way and so rapid fire compared to them, right? It's just the nature of the modern world, so that these photos don't really slow down the narrative. In fact, they can speed it up in an interesting way, that you can convey all this information in the photograph. You punctuate this text, have the photograph, suddenly you're taking in a huge amount of information, and like literally in like an eye blink. And then you go back to the text, which is a more leisurely cadence, where narrative and having to read text. I just think that's so cool. It's just like the fact that you can go in these two different speeds, and you can use that for a really interesting effect. The other thing is, as I said before, like the photograph can comment on the text or provide another explanation sometimes to the story as well. And they can establish that inner world and feeling. So I think in this particular piece, I was trying in some cases to try and show you, because this man is such a mystery, to show you what I think to be his inner world, what I believe could be his inner world. I don't know for sure, but I thought it was a way of telling the story and giving up like a plausible explanation for his story. So the other thing I thought was interesting was the selection process itself. The more I thought about it, the more I realized it's actually a really complex process. And I think anyone who's choosing photographs or images to embed in a piece of writing is doing something very complex. And it's worth taking a pause and thinking about all the different ways your selection of this piece of art or this photograph is really driving so many other creative decisions you're making in terms of your writing. And it's also, in turn, your writing is determining what you're selecting. And I thought that kind of interplay is super interesting to think about. In the case of most of my writing, which is historically, these are stories about 19th century people, and there's just not a lot that I necessarily could find. So it's really challenging to find something that can create the mood or the vibe, or tell explain somebody's inner life, whatever, because there's just not as many images, right? Certainly, I'm telling a story about somebody in 1830s Ireland. There's just not a lot there. There's a lot of illustrations, perhaps, that don't really necessarily serve the purpose. They may or may not, So that constraint also is something interesting to play with as well. There's like a limited amount of images you can use if you're trying to tell a historical story and you want to place it in the history. Like I don't use AI images at all. I mean, I see people doing it. It's kind of disappearing now from Substack, but in the family history writing community. But I saw people experimenting with it, where they'd say, "Oh, make me a picture of a German miller from the 18th century," and it was always hideous. It's just terrible. So I don't even bother doing that. There's no point. But you can find ways to find images that can illustrate what you're trying to tell, and you have to be a little more creative about it. So the images in the story of Abby King function in all these different ways in the text, and we can go through and I can sort of walk you through how I made some of these choices, and so you bear in mind like sometimes it's a matter of constraint, sometimes it's a matter of an overload of choices and having to make that decision, and then some places where like I sort of let my unconscious make the something you discovered through the selection of the photograph. So, um,
Lisa,
yeah.
you froze after you said subconscious, so I didn't catch the end
Oh,
of that.
sorry. Simply that that sometimes you choose something and that you don't really know why you chose it, but then the writing can illuminate something that you feel that you found in the picture that you could that would had gone unexpressed, and then you can write around it. Like you suddenly it gives you an extra. It propels your own writing, a little bit better, because the the pictures that you chose spoke to you in some way that you weren't aware of.
Got it.
Yeah. Okay, so let me go to the first one here. So this first one, this picture is of this was a detail of a picture of Abby at a family party, and I love this one because it tells you so much about him. Like it establishes who he is. He's this ladies' man. We know he's going to have this very complicated romantic life, and he is kind of bit of a lech, and I just love this image. And also he's a little shorter than this woman, so you sort of see a bit of a bantam rooster. And I know I just thought it was terrific. It was and I had to crop it, which is another thing to think about is how you want to modify these pictures as well, because sometimes you want to zero in on something in particular. And I do spend a lot of time like thinking about how to crop things in such a way to really make it to frame it exactly the way I want to. Um, so um, this I thought allowed you to meet him before you learned anything about him, and I thought that was really important. Um, and also the other thing I liked about this was that it's a little grainy, like old family photographs. And of course, as I blew it up and cropped it, it became grainier. And I thought that was fantastic too, because I love old grainy family photos because it's like memory, right? Memory is grainy. It's not, it's a kind of dreamlike. So I really, the fact that a lot of these old pictures are not crisp is great. I think it really serves what you want it to, serves the purpose. So the next photograph I chose, I was looking for something as a breather to the block of text. I wanted a little bit of punctuation and to have the reader take a breath. And then this picture was incredible. So I went looking for something that would be a good way to illustrate or think about Abby's arrival in America in the early 1920s as a little boy. Like, what was that world that looked like to him? And I Googled all kinds of things, Jews in New Jersey, I looked in Jewish community archives. I looked in any kind of thing like old postcards. I looked everywhere. And I found nothing that really spoke to me. And then I found this from the Library of Congress, and I loved it, even though it's a little out of the time period. It's 1915. I just love this because of the erasure of the person in the foreground. I thought that was just fantastic. It tells me it allows me to tell you something about him. Um, so the next one is of Elsie. So Elsie was his wife, and this one I thought was I had a lot of pictures of Elsie, but this one in particular I liked because it's just her saucy pose. I just felt it was just right. It spoke to the fact that she was kind of her own a renegade as well, and she just was going to live her life as well, and not by the confines of Orthodox, families that they probably grew up in. I think her family was not super religious, but his was. But she's obviously a modern girl from the 1920s, right? She was going to live her life the way she wanted. And I think that was key for the, that was why, that's the woman who chose him, right? Somebody who was going to be equally unconventional. And I thought this was a great photograph for that reason. And and again, it fills so many gaps. Like I don't have to write that much about Elsie because you have the photograph, you have this very strong image of this person. You really know her. You are introduced to her right away in this image. So I only had Susan Reed. Sorry, I beg your pardon. Um, The next one was this window wash. I spent a lot of time looking for a window washer picture that was just right. It was really hard. Most of the pictures I found had multiple window washers or window washers in the wrong period or window washers that just didn't evoke what I was looking for, which was somebody who was working by himself, which he did, somebody who was in New York in that period. I love because he's the fact he's reaching upward and you've got this the skyscraper, the Empire State Building behind him, and his wife later works in the Empire State Building. I thought it was like a perfect choice. It's Rockefeller Center actually, but you can see the Empire State Building behind, which is fantastic. And I just thought it was worth the hunt to find just the right picture. And it just tells us so much about this solitary person who really, I think the fact he worked by himself was part of the reason why he probably never could stick to a job. He didn't have a camaraderie. He didn't have a structure. He just kind of worked as he could, when he felt like it, sort of thing. So I thought that was also very important to illustrate. But this tells you a lot. As I said, a lot of visual information that tells you about him and tells you about the place where he is. This one I thought was really fantastic. So this was a picture. This was a family party, but I loved it because it tells you so much about this kind of, because it's cramped. Everyone's kind of jammed in there. It's a lot of little kids. You can sort of picture how chaotic and how what it would have been like to have lived in the house with him and struggling and whatnot. Even though these are actually people having a good time, I think there's something cramped in like the little kids that makes you feel like, oh, this could be like, the experience of being raised in a family with him and all the chaos that would come with it. And it was just, and also the look on his face too. He looks like he's been caught out, and this is around the time it's around this time when his wife finally kicks him out of the house, but he's been like, caught red-handed, which is it's fantastic. So the next one, this is a sure, I looked for something. He moved to Fair Lawn, New Jersey at some point in the early 50s, and I was looking for something about Fair Lawn. I was trying to think of what would be his mental state or what would he be thinking about, and we knew he was a wannabe entertainer. So I thought this picture of Fair Lawn was really terrific. This is probably the weakest selection in the collection of images I have here. Again, I wanted to punctuate the story a little bit, and I wanted to advance the story a little bit, but I thought it was really a beautiful picture of this old-fashioned movie theater, and I thought Happy Go Lucky, I thought was a great marquee. It was just like so much like what his life was like. So
yeah.
that was
And Lisa, I was just going to add to Fair Lawn. This town is not too far from New York City, right? It's
right.
pretty close to the George Washington Bridge.
Yeah.
So it's kind of that little fact was very interesting to me.
Yeah. Yeah. And then this one I thought was interesting. So my husband didn't like this choice when he was reading through this. He had no problem with anything I wrote, but he didn't like this picture of Milton Berle. He goes, "Why are you putting Milton Berle in here? I don't understand. There's nothing to do with it." But I thought this was so much the Abbey's inner life. Like he just wanted to be famous so badly. He wanted to have the adulation of women. I thought, and Milton Berle was a person of, that clearly would have been his aspiration, right? To be someone as famous as Milton Berle. And I thought it was such a fantastic picture, so I think again, like it's an example of where I thought it would tell you something about the character's inner life. And it also made me think more about, his stand-up career or his not ever fully achieved stand-up career. And then that comes in again at the end. And then the last two are, we drop into historical artifacts. So we're sort of moved away from his inner world or his family, photographs. And this is more, I felt like it was really great that I had these actual artifacts to share. So this was his life savings when he died. And somebody gave this. My husband grabbed this from the hospital. No one else wanted it. He took it as a souvenir, and he's had it ever since. So he's had it for 37 years. And then we opened it when I read it I was working on the story. He shared it with me, and he opened it, and he realized someone had pilfered the. Could not believe that. It was really just too fitting. It was just so I had to include that. And then the final thing I thought was this little other piece of paper that he rescued from the hospital. And this I thought was amazing. It really does look like an ancient scroll. It really does sum up the mystery of this man, right? It's like it's clearly notes for a stand-up act of some kind, but we can't possibly read it. Like we don't know what he's talking about. And it looks like an old scroll or some kind. It's some that has to be decoded or translated or the and the what's the word I want? It's the hermeneutics is not it's something that is just like it's never going to happen, right? It's just and I thought that was kind of interesting. But you can see when you read through the text, there's little things in here that give you hints about who this person is and where. So you see a reference to circumcision and the moil, and there's so you know who this person is more or less. Like you could probably place him as a 20th century Jewish guy in New York, but beyond that, you don't really know much about him. Anyway, so I'll pause there.
You guys could come off mute. And if you have any questions for Lisa. I love that last one. Like you said, it looks like a scroll or, particularly it looks like it's two columns almost, right?
Yeah, right.
Right.
It looks like some kind of religious document. It's really,
Right.
really strange.
Right. I could just imagine like them unscrolling the Torah, or
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I took a bunch of notes, so I could certainly ask questions, but any of you, Sam, Denise,
I have a question.
go ahead.
So actually, I want to go back to one of the things you were talking about in the beginning, micro history. So what you're saying is that micro history is looking through a narrow picture. Is that what you were saying?
Yeah, microhistory is it's as an academic,
Yeah.
genre of history. It's you take a small subject, so it could be an individual person's biography, it could be a community history, a place, a place. It could be an event, it could be something very small, and then using that to illuminate the larger history. So I don't know if you ever saw the movie The Return of Martin Guerre, where there's a story of that's another very famous piece of microhistory from the 70s. I highly recommend the movie.
I love that movie.
Yeah, she was very made very the woman who wrote that book, Natalie Davis, became very famous as a microhistorian based upon that book. But it's much more common today than it was when it made its first splash, back in the 80s. But it's really mostly useful for telling the story of ordinary people because there's not a lot of documentation. There's not a lot of it's not a traditional way. Like if you come from a community that has not been adequately documented or has been ignored by history. Microhistory is a good place to start. Like, because they're not going to be kings and generals. They're going to be regular people. But I can send you the piece I wrote about microhistory if you're interested more in that, because I think it's a really great way to think about family history.
I think I write like that very most often, but I had never heard that term. I'm not a studied writer. My academics are in a different place. So, but I had never heard that perspective of a micro writing or micro history. But I definitely, as soon as you said it, I was like, oh, I totally do that. So, I found that very interesting. I had a couple other questions. When you said sourcing photos and some of the photos that you used, so often you go into you put that into a request into into virtual world of, searching for a window cleaner, and that's what came up, or did you go technically to a library and do that?
So the way I do it is I'll type in like window cleaners, 1950s New York, and into Google Images, and then it'll give me options, and then then I'll click on it to see if it's public domain. it's not public domain, I'll try and see where I can find a, comparable public domain image or something. Sometimes though, and this is one of my tips that I can share with everybody, some of the places where I can look without even doing that, without resorting to Google Images and then tracking to find, where it comes from, is simply to go to some image libraries. So some of the places, like Library of Congress is a really good one. And I'll give you I can send everyone the URL so you can have them. And they're great for anything. Like you could use, even if you're not illustrating a memoir, even if you just want to write a piece of fiction, so, or you're looking for a writing prompt or something, there's unbelievable images. I mean, just incredible stuff. So it's Library of Congress is one of them. Smithsonian Open Access has lots of great stuff. The New York Public Library has incredible stuff. The Public Domain Image Archive, I'll give you the URL for all this. And you can just see like all this stuff that's free, available. You can use it in Substack. You can use it for any purpose. I also found lots of things from like local museums and stuff, but they're so squirrely sometimes. They don't like people using it, even if it's for non-commercial use. Like you have to write and ask for permission. And of course, you never hear from them. It's kind of a whole process.
That's what I was wondering.
So
you know,
I
so
usually try
basically
to
some
stick
of
to
these,
like the places where
so the places that you're mentioning, you do not have to request use. Like,
no, you don't. They'll say that these are the terms of use posted here online. Sometimes they'll say you can't use it for commercial purposes. Sometimes they don't care at all, whatever. Wiki Commons, I think you can use it as there's no rules at all. Some places they'll say you can't use it for commercial purposes, but you can use it for educational purposes or non-commercial. So it really depends. But I'll link all these URLs. You can have a look and see. But I think the most critical thing to take away is that there's so much public domain images out there that you can use that are just like, they not only do they illustrate the story, but they're such great jumping off points, things that you hadn't thought about, once you.
I appreciate your because the writing that I've done, I've used my own photos, I've created my own photos, I've done my own, and even in planning for a book that I have written, I have my own. So, but I am intrigued by the idea of how you used photos that weren't necessarily immediate to the subject focus, but still, like when you had Merle, the singer at the end there.
Oh, Milton Berle, yeah.
Yeah, Milton Berle. When I looked at it immediately, I thought to myself that my engagement was, oh, this is who he wanted to be.
Yeah, exactly.
Even before you said it.
Yeah, exactly.
So, it does lend that perspective. And I honestly don't think I had ever thought of that before. So thank you. Well, and I'm new in this virtual world. So trying to find my space here.
Great questions, Denise.
Thank you.
Does anybody else have questions for Lisa?
Just, I came on just briefly and I didn't know you, Lisa, so I was quickly trying to read it. It looks beautiful and thank you. I'm just curious, so your husband, how did he fit into which was his mother? I'm just curious which one was he?
Oh, it was Diane. It was the soft-hearted one who made them all go to his funeral. She's a very nice lady.
So that's his mother.
That's his mother. Yeah.
Okay. So that was like the third or fourth marriage for this?
No, that was he had 6 kids with Elsie. So she was one of the 6 kids with Elsie.
Oh, okay. So the grandmother was the original, the first wife. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay,
and Jamie was my husband's uncle.
Okay. Thanks very much.
Anybody else have questions? So, go ahead. Was that Sherry?
Can you hear me? Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah.
I loved how you use images to tell a story. And I like what you said earlier, if I understood it, is, just in the image where the image is speaking for itself, that the reader doesn't have to necessarily read the text to get,
Yeah.
what's going on. I love that. I'm a very
Mhm.
visual person. And, the first picture that you showed, she actually looked like Katharine Hepburn, the lady there dancing. And
Yeah.
just, my mind went into story of
Mm.
why is this? He wasn't the most attractive man, and
No.
here he is with this beautiful
Yeah.
looking woman. So my mind just kind of went like, who is this man? And it was very interesting how you immediately engage us like, huh, that's a very odd pairing. And
Right. Right.
so I love that, and how I've never really taken it that deep where this can be the exclamation point of the story, just this impact of this picture, and it just kind of all weaves together. So
Mhm.
I really enjoyed that.
Mhm.
So it wasn't really a question, it was more observation.
I also wanted to piggyback on, well, really what both Denise and Sherry were observing. Like, to me, it's fascinating that you combine the pictures that are part of the story, that are related to it directly,
Mhm.
with those other images, because it's it's seamless, really. And I have such a allegiance in my writing to my own images.
Mhm.
Um, I mean, I have such a huge amount of respect for the world of photography, and particularly, going back to historical
Mhm.
images. But it really is amazing, and I understand the amount of effort that takes, because I used to write courseware,
Mhm.
for digital courseware, and finding images that are in public domain to map to a particular concept or historical period is
Mhm.
just amazing. So the
Mhm.
work that you do is incredible. And then, you know, with Sherry's observation, it is really fascinating because, like, when you select that picture, you have something in mind. You have that
Mhm.
body of knowledge. You have what you're sharing in the story itself. But
Mhm.
then when you share the story, readers will take from that picture, as you talked about earlier, what they
Mhm.
want, right?
Yeah.
They will interpret it how they want. So
Mhm.
it's almost um, it's almost like a dangerous thing in a way. Like
Mhm.
you're
Mhm.
taking a bet that people
Yeah.
won't
They'll read
misinterpret
it the
it.
same way. Yeah. But
Yeah.
but people read text different ways too, though. I mean, I guess it's more open-ended with the image, though. That's the issue. Yeah.
Oh yeah, definitely people read
Mhm.
text, in any
Yeah.
way that they want.
Yeah.
Um, you were talking about how you don't really know Susan Sontag, but you were very smart to bring her up. I just want to share a quote with you guys,
Mhm.
what she said about this type of thing. To take a picture is to have an interest in things as they are, in the status quo remaining unchanged, at least for as long as it takes to get a good picture, she
Mm.
said. To be in complicity with whatever makes a subject interesting, worth photographing, including when that is the interest, another person's pain or misfortune.
Mm. Mm.
She said some really complex things.
She's so smart. It's like, yeah,
Yeah.
she thought about this a little more than I have, I think.
No, 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 no.
But
No.
I see what you say. Yeah, it's there's so much going on. I guess the point I was making is that when you're doing this yourself, I think you should owe it to yourself to reflect on how complex a process this is.
Yes.
To choose things, and then because you can't help but be influenced by your choice, and then yeah, lot of lot of thinking going on that may not even be conscious.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.